that they had both names on. With Jack Raines no longer being alive, she had access to $100,000.
It's 100,000 reasons why she would want to kill Jack Raines.
Tina would have had to have manipulated Jack to get that money and convinced him, we'll take care of you if something ever happens to you. And their relationship was such that he trusted her. You know, if you're Tina and you're thinking, gee, if this cat has a stroke and I'm going to actually use this money for him and I'm not going to get it, that's $100,000. That'll go quick.
Detective Mayersick?
6 days after the murder, Jack's bank contacts detectives with news of account activity.
The bank called me, said, hey, Tina's down here trying to cash this $100,000 account out. The bank employees were like, she showed up, she's visibly shaking. She's saying, hey, you know, it's okay for me to get this money, I'm on the account. And I'm like, you guys internally have to figure out a way to hold on to that money.
The bank freezes the account, and Tina leaves empty-handed.
We felt we had a strong case against Tina Williamson, but you got to prove that someone is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We needed evidence that we can eliminate reasonable doubt.
Detectives once again turn to Betty to help them get the evidence they need.
Betty provided a ride from near the victim's house. If Tina would admit to receiving that ride from Betty Olson on that day, there would be no doubt that she was involved in this crime.
Betty calls Tina while police listen in and record the call.
Just relax. Be yourself, okay? You can do this.
Because that's money to the rest of me. There's no evidence against me. Say, if I killed him, I'd blow the head off.
Normal people don't describe killing someone to a friend. That's the language of a killer.
The cops call me. They're supposed to be coming down here, so I'm coming to your house. Yeah. They told me they'd be here probably around 2:30, 3 o'clock. I'm not there now, all right? No.
The tone in her voice told me that Tina was getting worried and that she thought that pressure might be coming on Betty.
And I want to know what you want me to tell them and what you want me not to tell them. The reason she's saying is that I was at my house to have time. The main thing not to tell them is about that ride. That looks me and mother for us. To the vicinity here, his house. He's not saying nothing about that.
I remember telling Tom, I sure hope that got on tape. Because it was like, holy moly, I can't believe she just said that.
Based upon the voicemails that were left on the victim's phone, Tina had the alibi that she was home during the time that Mr. Raines was killed.
Thank you, sure. That's kind of an I just wanted to thank you for very good. I'll be home this today. I ain't gonna lie. Thanks,
At first, we believed that she was calling because she cared about her friend. I know now that she was being insincere and trying to throw us off the track because she, in fact, was the killer.
On the 4th of December 2007, Tina is arrested for the murder of Jack Raines.
We were getting closer to our house and it was like glowing blue because of all the police and all the cop cars. Terrified me.
Tina didn't show any emotion. She wasn't angry. She didn't cry. She didn't carry on. She was just void of emotion.
She was my rock. I was raised by Tina. You know, it was just me and her at home for so long. When they took her away, they took a part of me away.
At trial, Tina Williamson is found guilty of second-degree murder and felony murder. She is sentenced to 71 years in prison.
Since everything is over with and I know Tina's in prison where she needs to be, I don't worry about it no more. But every time I drive by Dad's house, I look over there and I think about what went on there. She never cared for him. She didn't care for Daddy at all. All she wanted was what she could get out of him. For Tina to come in my daddy's house, have sex with my daddy, him go in and sit down at the kitchen table, and her to come around behind him and shoot him 5 times in the back of the head. That's cold-blooded, evil murder.
I know who the woman was and is, and she's just not someone that could have done this. That's how I choose to look at it.
Just like Stephanie, I encounter a lot of relatives of suspects who don't want to accept the fact that someone they love is capable of doing something so horrific. But the sad truth is that people do bad things.
Robert Motter has informed detectives he witnessed 83-year-old Jack Rains arguing with somebody driving a champagne-colored Mercedes 2 days before he was murdered. They have linked the car to a man named David Johnson.
David Johnson?
Yeah.
I'm Detective Downing. Could I ask you a couple of questions?
What's this about?
I asked him about his whereabouts during the time of the crime. He provided us with an alibi that he was at work.
Can you prove that?
Mr. Johnson at the time worked at a company called Standard Register.
Detectives contact the company and ask for Johnson's time cards from the day of the murder.
Time clocks at Standard Register reflect that Mr. Johnson clocked in at 9 o'clock in the morning and then took his break at 12:02. He returned to work at 12:14. So we checked. Is it possible? Could David Johnson have driven from Standard Register to the victim's house, committed the murder, and got back to work? Time en route is typically about 12 minutes. There's just no way that David Johnson could have committed this crime, even if he, broke every speed limit. He wouldn't have been able to do it and get back in time. We found the only black male that owns a Champagne Mercedes in Rutherford County. He didn't have an altercation with the victim, and he's not the guy that killed Jack Rains.
Now seriously doubting Robert's story, police call him back in for questioning.
We found a man that matches your description you gave us. You sure you saw this man?
In a second interview with Robert Motter, he changed his story. He did not see the confrontation with the black male. He was told to tell us about it by Tina.
Why would she do that?
He suspected that Tina and the victim were having sexual relationship. It did seem odd to me. First, she's a married woman, and he's a married man. But more than that, he's in his 80s and she's in her 30s.
Detectives bring Tina in for questioning.
your relationship?
It was getting out of loneliness.
Did it ever go beyond friendship?
Oh, no. Are you talking about sexual?
Or romantic?
No, I can't believe you said that.
I gotta ask these things, Tina.
First of all, that's totally disgusting to me.
Well, just like I said,
Second of all,
didn't I tell you, we gotta be frank.
I know he loved me to death.
I gotta say things.
And I love him to death, but it's not that kind of love.
Okay.
Tina also denies coaching Robert into telling the police about David Johnson. Both Tina and Robert are released without charge, but investigators now know one of them is lying and decide to ask Tina's husband Ron about a possible affair.
If there is a triangle where there's a husband, a wife, and then a third party, you have to look at the husband as being the person that you need to eliminate first as suspect.
We told Ron about the allegations that Tina was having a sexual relationship with the victim.
That's my wife you're talking about.
Ron was upset.
They need to look into Ron's alibi at the time of Jack's death.
We wanted to see, because he was a long-haul truck driver, was he in town? Was he in the state? Was he anywhere nearby at the time that Mr. Raines was killed?
Detective Downing obtains Ron's timesheet for the day of the murder.
Ron's work records had indicated that he had left that morning about 8:30 in the morning, and he had come back after making his delivery sometime around 11:30. Because we knew that the crime had occurred sometime between 11 o'clock and 12:30 in the afternoon, those records did not eliminate him as a suspect.
With Ron's alibi now in question, the lab results on the clothes Jack wore on the night of his murder come in.
Please read what the TBI found.
Traces of Jack's DNA are found on his boxer shorts, mixed with someone else's.
It was the type of DNA that you get from sexual intercourse.
The victim's semen was mixed with an unknown female's DNA. So obviously, we're going to want to check and see, is this unknown female, is this Tina Williamson?
Detective Motorsick.
I've got a buddy at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. He called me and said, hey, I got some great news for you. They had Tina Williamson's DNA there in the flat.
Thank you very much. You'd send that report up to us right away. Thank you.
For it to be in the flap tells me that they were having intercourse and his penis was through the flap and his boxers were still on.
When I was told that Daddy and Tina had a sexual relationship, I thought that was sick. It was bad on Daddy's part, and it was even worse on hers.
Now suspecting Tina was sleeping with Jack, investigators get a warrant for Tina and Ron's cell phone records
August 31st, 2007.
to pinpoint where they were on the day of the murder.
There are various cell phone towers scattered throughout the county. It just so happens that really close to the victim's house is a cell phone tower. So any calls made near his house would immediately go to that tower.
The first records to come through are Ron's. Detective Downing checks if he was near Jack's house at the time of the murder. But he finds no calls from Ron's phone pinging that tower. In fact, the phone records confirm Ron's alibi that he was working in another town.
Ron was nowhere near the victim's house when Mr. Raines was murdered, so Ron was excluded as a suspect.
This
point of the investigation, we have already eliminated David Johnson as a suspect. And now we've eliminated...
You know what's going to happen?
What?
If you know something and you withhold it,
I swear to God I'm not cheating you right in my eyes. If anything I know, you ask me, because I may forget to tell you, I will tell you deep God, honest truth. I won't hold anything back for you. Small to big, I won't. And if you ask me a question, if you can think of something to ask me, I'll tell you.
the big one is who killed him.
But I don't know.
After striking out with Tina, detectives hope her cell phone records will provide fresh clues about her movements on the day of the murder.
Tina, from the beginning, had provided her alibi as being that she and Jack Raines went to breakfast together in Woodbury at 9 o'clock, and that he took her home immediately after, and that he returned to Murfreesboro. From her report, I discovered that Tina made 3 telephone calls in the time frame that Jack Raines was murdered from the victim's cell phone tower. That told me that she wasn't home when she said she was at home. In fact, she was right next to the victim's house at the time of his death. Those 3 calls were all made to one person, Betty Olson. We wanted to find out, why was she calling her? What was she saying?
Detectives track down Betty Olson and pay her a visit, armed with a device to record the conversation.
A lot of times when we respond to someone's house to conduct an interview, we will turn the recorder on ahead of time. She had dogs that were very noisy. They were little annoying dogs. They weren't threatening, they were just loud and obnoxious little dogs. That told us that Tina had something to hide. I was excited inside. I didn't display that to Betty. And then Betty told us that she picked up Tina on John Bragg Highway in close proximity to the victim's house on the day of the murder.
Coming from Murfreesboro. It's like coming from Walmart. She called me on the cell phone and asked me if I could come and pick her up. Didn't have a way home. So I went and picked her up. She was walking home and I picked her up on the side of the road.
The spot where Betty picked Tina up is just a mile from Jack Raines' house.
At this particular point, we felt like our case was beginning to come together, but we needed more information. We needed evidence about why she was in Murfreesboro.
Betty insists she had no idea why Tina was there, only that her friend asked her to keep the ride a secret.
I believe that Betty thought that she could be held accountable for this because she did provide a ride, so she knew it's quite serious. We asked Betty Olson to wear a wire to record her conversation with Tina Williamson. Betty agreed to do that for us. We positioned our unmarked vehicle approximately 200 feet from where they were meeting. That distance is close enough to where if something bad were to happen, we could get there quickly.
We recognized that if Tina Williamson knew that Betty Olson was wearing a wire, she is subject to being harmed or even killed.
Warhammer 40,000 Conquest.
Late night crime, and at 1.
Ladbrokes Casino sponsors late nights.
Betty Olson has agreed to help detectives collect evidence against her friend, Tina Williamson, the prime suspect in the murder of Jack Raines. she's headed to Tina's house wearing a wire.
We were hoping that Tina would just go ahead and tell her everything about the murder.
I was at fault. Mr. Raines being alive and dead, not being right. He gave me money all the time. He paid for my medicine. Paid for my doctor fees. Anything I wanted, I don't care what it was he got. And I ain't a sister.
Tina told Betty that she was better off with Mr. Raines alive. And so, it wasn't what we had hoped for at the time.
If Tina killed the golden goose, there's got to be a reason.
To confirm that Jack was
Hello? Dad? It's Tina. Tina flipped her truck. She was in an accident. It had been raining, and she hit a slick spot in the road, and she went off into like a ditch, and it ended up breaking her back. I was terrified. You know, I was a child still, and this woman that had been taking care of me most of my life, you know, I was terrified I was going to lose her. My dad, he was a nervous wreck. He came immediately. He dropped everything to come be with her. After a couple of years, Tina was able to walk again, but she wasn't able to drive because of the medication that she was on. I'd be gone all day long at school. My dad was at work, so she was just by herself. She wasn't happy being at home all the time. My dad wasn't around a lot because he's a truck driver. He drives hundreds of miles every day, and he comes home on the weekends.
on his way home from work. Ron often visits the local flea market, pursuing his passion for collecting antique guns.
Could you show me that .22 revolver?
You have good taste. Mind if I take a look?
Not at all.
That's where he first meets fellow gun enthusiast, 83-year-old Jack Raines.
Minimal kickback, maximum efficiency.
I love the revolver. I'm Ron.
Jack, happy to make your acquaintance.
My dad, he had to put Ruby, his wife, into a nursing home because she had dementia. That was a tough decision for him. My mother and my dad was together about 50 years. Well, he was lonely, and he wanted attention from people. I was working every day, so I couldn't spend time with Daddy while I was working. I always looked up to him, and I always wanted to kind of be like him in a way. He was my hero, because before he retired, he was a policeman, he was a highway patrol. He was a World War II vet.
My father and Jack Raines' mutual love for guns, it bonded them, and that led to my dad inviting him to the house. This man in his 80s just shows up.
Ladies charmed.
My father and Jack Raines, they talk for hours about handguns.
As good as the Glock? Well, the Glock is a lot more expensive.
Tina was very friendly to anybody that she met.
Hey, Jack, why don't you come over and have a game?
That's what she enjoyed, making other people feel good and have a good time.
Over the next few weeks, the 83-year-old grandfather starts spending more time with Ron and his family.
My dad, he loved to cook on the grill.
How are you?
Good to see you. Get something to drink.
Smelling good.
And if it was pretty outside, he was home on the weekends, that's what we were doing.
Really yummy.
Jack steps in when Tina's daughter Jessie and her boyfriend Robert are in need of a place to stay.
Yeah, well, you know, I went to school the same place as you, honey. I live in Murfreesboro right now, but I grew up right here.
I was from Murfreesboro.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, where y'all living at right now?
Well, we're actually looking for a home right now. Our lease is up. Yeah.
Well, I have a place behind mine I usually rent out. And it's unoccupied right now.
Are you serious? Well, you think maybe we could stay there for a while? Because
Happy to oblige.
I mean, that would be a lifesaver. Thanks.
Welcome on board.
Thanks so much.
Tina didn't really know her own father that well, and she saw a father figure in him, and he was willing to be that for her.
You doing okay over here?
Oh, just a time out.
Wish my dad had spent as much time with me as you do.
You don't talk to your dad?
We were never that close.
Your daddy was a fool.
The bond was close enough between my dad and Tina and Jack Raines that my dad and Tina had a key to his house.
Well, just in case, well, you know, I have a fall or something. Not that I'm gonna. Rather safe than sorry.
Sure. Anything I can do to help?
Well, you can give an old man a hand.
Sure.
With Tina unable to drive due to her medication, Jack starts giving her rides into town.
Well, hi there.
They would go out to eat and just enjoy each other's company.
In return, Tina helps Jack take care of his home.
Tina would go over there, do what she could, to help out and to keep his home life in order where he was clueless.
Over the next 18 months, Jack and Tina fall into a daily routine.
That morning, like most mornings, Jack came to pick Tina up. They went and got some food together, and he brought her back home. And then he left and he went back to his house in Murfreesboro.
Thank you, Tina. I'm trying to get hold of you. I just wanted to thank you for it very quickly. I was going to see if you wanted to come over Monday for the book out. Just call and let me know that several people coming. And I really know you're coming, okay? I'll be home this today. I ain't got a ride. Thanks. Bye.
It was very unusual that he wasn't answering. They talked on the phone quite a bit. If he wasn't with us physically, then there was some kind of line of communication there.
The next day, the Williamsons still haven't heard from Jack.
Just heard about you. I hadn't heard from you, so if you get this message, give us a call. What's going on? The Steve called me on my cell phone.
At that point, not being able to get in touch with him, I know that that had to be hard on my dad and Tina, not knowing what was going on.
Why don't you call him again, sweetie?
Feeling just by the tone of his voice, and what I heard there is I could tell that he was truly concerned. Tina and my dad just got to the point they were like, something's not right. This isn't normal. They had a key to get into his house that he had given them. So they were like, we're gonna go. You know, let's see what's going on. He may need help. There may be something going on.
Jack? Where are you, Jack? Jack? Jack!
Here the road to find out who done it. You know what happened with Investigation Discoveries. I want names. Daytime detectives.
Did you shoot that gun tonight?
Oh, no, every weekday, we're bringing you the top detective shows from the ID archive. Riveting real life. Whodunit stories. Daytime detectives. Weekdays from 11. Only on Investigation Discovery.
Tony Harris returns to the scene of the crime,
This was personal.
revealing the truths.
Are you prepared to tell me what happened then?
Ladbrokes Casino sponsors late nights.
Ron and Tina Williamson haven't heard from their 83-year-old friend, Jack Rains, for over 24 hours. They drive to his house to check on him.
My dad walked to the kitchen and found Jack.
Jack? Jack!
There's no telling what that, did to him in that moment. It's hard to think about.
Jack, I want to see Jack.
His first thought was, I gotta get Tina out of there. She can't see this. They went to the driveway area, and that's when Tina started crying and stuff because she knew, there was something bad. And that's when my dad called 911.
Yes, ma'am, I need a ambulance.
Where are you at?
On McFarland Street in Murfreesboro, second house on the right. Hurry, please.
Okay, how did they get hurt?
I don't know. We just got here. We come to check on him. It's Jack Rains. My name is Ron Williams. Please get over here now.
Okay, I got somebody on the way. Is he breathing?
No, I don't think so. We've been trying to call all day. We come to check on him. Please. Hurry.
Okay.
Go.
Sir, I'm going to transfer you to the ambulance service, okay? I want you to stay on.
When my partner and I arrived at the scene, Tina and Ron were both in the driveway. They were visibly upset.
The door was unlocked. I went to look for Jack in the bedroom.
And that's when I found Jack in the kitchen.
We came upon the victim seated at his kitchen table, and both my partner and I immediately knew that we had a homicide that we would be investigating. Based upon the fact that the victim had gunshot wounds to the back of his head. He was not in a defensive posture. He was actually seated at the kitchen table, wearing boxer shorts and a t-shirt. And it became very clear at that point that he was surprised, that he was quite comfortable when he was attacked. There were valuables throughout the house that went untouched. In his bedroom, we found items that were moved about, pieces of jewelry, titles to vehicles, things that could be of value to a common thief. They were left behind.
These clues suggest robbery wasn't the motive.
When we collected evidence from the house, we did collect the victim's clothing. Those were submitted to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations for forensic evaluation.
I found out about Daddy's death, I didn't cry because I didn't know how to feel. How do you feel when you've lost somebody like that? I wanted the killers, or whoever it was that killed Daddy, I want them caught and brought to justice.
No one deserves for this to happen to them, but someone as kind and genuine and caring and loving as Jack was. I was angry.
The medical examiner was able to tell us an approximate range where the suspect was when the shots were fired. There was one shot reported as from a distance. 3 more shots were progressively closer to the body, and then they make contact with the back of his skin and pull the trigger one more time. They wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Ron and Tina Williamson arrive at the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office to assist detectives with the investigation.
We want to thank you both for coming in today.
Be reassured we'll do whatever we can to catch this killer.
Tina and Ron were the complainants, the people who actually called law enforcement in this case. They put themselves in the crime scene, so it's incumbent upon us to prove or disprove their involvement in this case. The medical examiner's report stated the victim was killed on the day before their body was discovered.
Well, we just need to know your whereabouts between 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. on August 31st.
Ron said that he was at work. He was visibly upset.
Jack picked me up and we went for breakfast at Woodbury. And then he took me back and I didn't go anywhere else after that.
Tina provided us with the alibi that she was home during the time that Mr. Raines was killed.
Four days after the murder, coroner's office releases Jack's body to his family.
My father was a great man.
At the funeral, my dad and Tina were both very just heartbroken. I was heartbroken. It was a small gathering, and that's really what I remember most. I just remember him being so sad. I was so sad, and it was hard.
Thank you, but thank you so much.
At the funeral home, Tina came up to me. My wife was standing there beside of me, and she threw her arms around my stomach and hugged me.
It was like she lost her own father.
In the days after the funeral, Tina keeps in regular contact with the investigators.
Detective Downing speaking. Oh, hi, Tina.
She was calling because she cared about Jack, and she wanted to check on the status of the case.
Our main thing right now is we want whoever done it, we want them to pay. He was our best friend, and more than that, he was our family. He was at our Thanksgiving, he was our Christmases. You just don't understand how much he was to us.
We recorded these calls because we thought, Tina might tell us information that would help the case.
Jack had a very bad habit of not locking his door. And me and my husband have talked about it, trying to figure out what happened. And I'm wondering, and he's wondering, if somebody was waiting on him. Because Jack would have fought the way he is. And, Robert had a lot more information. Robert.
That's your daughter's boyfriend, right?
Right. Robert had the first-hand information on something he thought of.
Robert was dating my stepsister, and they were renting out